The jury had just been excused for the day after hearing closing arguments from both the defense and prosecution. It was quite late in the day, around 4 o'clock, so the judge ordered the jury to return to the hotel, where they were sequestered for the duration of the 2-week trial, the culmination of an investigation that had lasted nearly a year. The defendant was taken back to the Tarrant County Correctional Center in Fort Worth, and nothing more will happen until Monday when the jury reconvenes. So I decided to walk to my room at the Hilton Garden Inn in downtown Dallas, stopping at a bar along the way for a quick beer and snack. I had just finished my burger and was halfway through my beer when I heard a woman's voice behind me. "Hey, cowboy, want to buy the girl a drink?" she asked. I turned and looked at the source of the question. She seemed familiar to me, and then it dawned on me. Ashley Marks, is that you?" I asked. "Yes, it's me," she said, smiling a smile that could melt the polar ice cap. I invited her to sit down and waved to the waitress. "Oh my God, how many years has it been? 16, 17. How are you?" I asked. "I think it's been 17 years, she said. "Ashley was one of my best friends in school, along with Steve Jenkins and Jeline Carter. Together, we were called the Four Musketeers. That all changed when Ashley's dad got a job in Austin during our senior year. I haven't seen or heard anything from her since then. I'm fine," she said. "Went to the University of Texas, graduated, got married, divorced, and now I'm a reporter for the Austin Statesman." "Wow, you've had a busy life. What happened?" I asked. She shrugged. "I was married," she said, emphasizing the I. "Unfortunately, he wasn't. Or at least he had a hard time remembering his vows. After I caught him cheating for the 3rd time, I said, 'Enough is enough,' and threw him out on the street as a city boy," she said. "I think he ended up managing a McDonald's somewhere in Beaumont." "Sorry to hear that," I said. "I know what it is, believe me. So what brought you to Big D?" "I've been covering the Jenkins trial for the last couple of weeks. There's some confusion. I saw you testify the other day, by the way," she said. "I'm so sorry for Jeline. Whatever her shortcomings, she did not deserve to die like that." I didn't say anything to her. No, Jeline didn't deserve to die the way she did. I would have preferred something more painful, like being burned at the stake, but that opportunity, like so many others, was taken from me by the man I once considered my best friend. "So, how are you coping, Bill Jennings?" she asked, interrupting my thoughts. "As good as can be expected, considering the last 16 years of my life have been nothing but a fraud," I said. "At least you have children," she said. I nodded. "Yes, I think so," I said. "They are mine, legally, anyway." "You may not be the biological father, but trust me, you are their father in every way that matters," she said. "I think you're right," I said. "But it still doesn't make me any happier." "Look, I have a confession to make," she began. I looked at her, wondering what she was up to. "You know, every reporter in this courtroom will want your story. I'd like to be the one to tell you, if you don't mind," she said. "I know you probably have a lot of trust issues right now, and I completely understand. But no one there knows you like I do. Look, if it helps, we can sign a contract. You give me exclusive rights to your story, and I will protect you from predators. Sort of like a publicist, you know. I won't post anything without showing you first. My editor has already approved it, and I want to do it right." I knew deep down that she was right. I've already been hounded by reporters from every major news outlet in the country: CNN, Fox News, Associated Press, you name it. Even a few smaller but well-known bloggers reached out to me. It was so overwhelming. Something told me that I could trust her, so I made a decision. "Okay, Ashley," I said. "Agreed. And how will it work? Are we going to do this here in my hotel room or in your room? What are you up to?" "Well," she said, "I've been wanting to see the old house for a long time. It's just, 2.5 hours west of here by car. It's still pretty early, and the jury won't start deliberating until Monday morning, so we have the weekend. Why don't we take a ride there, and you can show me where it all happened? You can tell me the details along the way, And when we get there, I might talk to your kids and parents if that's okay. I thought for a moment before agreeing. It would be a nice break from the trial, and I thought it would be nice to show Ashley a little and maybe reconnect. Sounds good, I said. Where are you staying? I'm at the Hilton right around the corner. And you? She asked. The same. Do you want to grab a few things first before we head out? She nodded, and we agreed to meet at my truck in the parking lot. You won't miss it, I told her. Big blue crew cabin. Same old bill. Gotta have the biggest pickup truck in the state. Give me half an hour after we get there so I can change into something more comfortable and grab a few things, okay? She asked. I agreed, and we set off. The sun had just set below the horizon when we hit Interstate 20, heading toward Abilene. I was glad because I hated driving against the sun. Ashley had changed out of her professional reporter attire and was now wearing a knee-length denim skirt and a white Western blouse. She looked just as beautiful to me now as she did at school. I also got a good view of her shapely legs. She smiled. I know what you're thinking, cowboy, she said. Oh, really? I asked. You're thinking something like, why didn't I go with Ashley instead of Jolene? I laughed. Do your well-honed reporter instincts tell you that? I asked. No, the way you look at my legs says it. Like you did in school, she said. I bet you thought I forgot about it. Well, legs like these are hard to forget, I told her. I always loved looking at her legs back then, especially when she wore that little cheerleader uniform. She smiled and pulled out her recorder. So tell me, Ashley, is there a Mr. Right in Austin? No, she said. After the divorce, I focused almost exclusively on work. As you can imagine, I've had a lot of trust issues with men, and until now I haven't met anyone I'd like to spend time with. Sorry to hear that, I said. She laughed. I kind of doubt it, she said. Damn those reporter instincts. Anyway, what do you say we start our little road show? Yeah, okay, I said. She placed her recorder on the dashboard, making sure it wouldn't fall. Do you mind if I record this? She asked. I shook my head. Not at all, I said. I want you to do everything right. I took a sip of coffee and thought for a moment before starting. Well, Ashley, as you know, Steve and I, along with you and Jolene, were very close in school. After you left, there were 3 of us left. I asked Jolene to marry me right after graduation, and she said yes. Steve and I both joined the Marines right out of high school. Both went to San Diego for basic training and even ended up in the same platoon. Jolene and I agreed to get married after I completed my special training. After basic training, Steve and I were separated. He ended up in the infantry, and I ended up in computer electronics. So he was assigned to Camp Pendleton, and I was sent to Quantico, Virginia. About a month or so later, Steve seriously injured his knee and was eventually medically discharged. You may have noticed that he still walks a little with a limp. Couldn't they have given him an office job? Ashley asked. No, it doesn't work that way, I said. Everyone in the Corps is a basic marksman, regardless of their military specialty. Even clerks and computer technicians must meet the physical requirements for combat. So Steve came home and his father used his connections to get him a job in the county. That's right, his father was a county commissioner, wasn't he? Ashley asked. I nodded. Yes, right until your death. This is how Steve was first elected. I think the voters respected old man Jenkins enough to elect his son. So I graduated, came home, and got married. Steve was my best man. I later found out that he was also the best man for Jolene, if you know what I mean. It's a dog, Ashley said. Anyway, I ended up on the West Coast, and almost 9 months after our wedding, Brian was born. About a year later, I was sent to Okinawa for a year-long tour without my family. We moved back home for a month, and I left Jolene and Brian in my house that I inherited from my grandparents. We thought it would be easier for them with our parents nearby. After that tour, I returned home, packed up Jolene and Brian, and we headed to my new duty station, Camp Lejeune, North Carolina. Less than 9 months later, Jessica was born. Jolene was having a very difficult pregnancy and insisted that I have the procedure done. She claimed that if we ever wanted another child, I could always have surgery to reverse it. So I agreed. If I knew then what I know now, everything would be completely different. Looking at the photos, it's pretty easy to see aspects of Steve in the kids, Ashley said. Didn't you notice this when they were born? That's a fair question, I said. You may remember that when we were younger, people often said that Steve and I could pass for brothers. We both have the same hair and eye color. Hell, we even have the same earlobes. No, they both looked a lot like me when they were babies, and they both had their mother's eyes and nose. It wasn't until they got older that I started to notice the similarities. When we get to my house, you will see baby pictures. In any case, I finished my service in the Corps, and we all returned home. My father took me to his computer store and introduced me to all the other kids. I immediately started working for him, which was very nice. Unfortunately, this also meant frequent travel. Does this ever bother Jolene? Ashley asked. I shook my head. No. Against. She seemed to enjoy the fact that I was away visiting clients and building networks. Dad had clients in Dallas, Abilene, Wichita Falls, Amarillo, everywhere. Hell, we even had clients in Houston and Oklahoma City. Jolene thought it was great that I was building such a large customer base, I said. In fact, my absence gave her all the time she needed to bring Steve into our home and into our bed. Of course, I found out much later. Are you saying she had sex with Steve in your marital bed? Ashley asked. Yes, all the time, I said. So I burned her and the mattress after she was shot. I don't blame you, Ashley said. I also burned a few other things, like the sofa and the chair that Steve used a lot, I said. Jolene's wedding dress was also burned. Ashley winced at this. So Steve was a regular visitor to your house? Ashley asked. Yes, so much so that he even had his own chair. It didn't bother me then, since I considered him a friend. He came, especially on Sundays after church. We'd start watching the game, and he'd almost always fall asleep in that damn chair. The kids started calling him Uncle Steve, too, mostly at Jolene's insistence. It annoyed me at the time, but now I understand why. Hey, I don't know about you, but I'd like to have some more coffee. Are you ready to stop? I asked. Ashley turned off her recorder. Of course, she said. I wouldn't mind that and a smoking break if it's okay. I nodded and took the next exit. Taking a break from the ride, we hit the highway again, heading toward Abilene. Ashley pulled out her recorder and placed it back on the dashboard. So this whole time you had no idea that Jolene was cheating on you with Steve? She asked. No, I was probably a typical blind husband. She never showed herself to Metis respect, at least in person, and there were never any hints of sex in the house when I was not there. I think they have been very careful all these years, I said. So when did you find out? She asked. About a year ago, I was sent to Los Angeles for a month-long course on an ERP package that we were supposed to support for a client in San Antonio. Jolene and the kids always emailed me and called me every day. One weekend, I received an email from Brian. Jolene and Steve took the kids fishing, and he caught a pretty big bass. So he sent me a photo, I said. I took out my phone and handed it to Ashley, telling her which album to open. The photo I was looking for showed Brian with a big fish. Steve was next to him. Jolene was on Brian's other side, with her left hand on Steve's right shoulder. What do you see in this photo? I asked Ashley. Oh my God, she exclaimed. They are so similar, they even have the same dimples. Yes, I said. I noticed it too. Now look at Jolene's left hand. What's special about it? Ashley rotated the photo and enlarged the image using her fingers. I don't see any rings, she said. That's right, I said. Guess where they were. Ashley looked at me questioningly. I showed her the folder where I kept the photos Jessica had sent. Look there until you see the photo with the ashtray, I said. Okay, I found it, she said. Enlarge this photo and tell me what you see. Her eyes widened as she zoomed in on the image. Is this what I'm thinking? She asked. I nodded. Yes, it's the same ring I put on her finger when I married her, along with my great-grandmother's wedding ring, and guess whose cigarette butts are in that ashtray? Let me guess, Steve, she said. Oh, there's one more thing, I said. This ashtray is not just in our bedroom, but on my nightstand. That means Steve was in our bed, probably with Jolene. Ashley started crying. How could she do this to you? And you're saying Jessica sent it, she asked. Yes, I said. She often helped her mother clean the house, which meant emptying all the ashtrays. She saw it before they left, took a photo, and sent it to me. She was very upset. I can imagine, Ashley said. Did she say anything to Jolene? Don't think. I wrote back to her and told her not to tell her mother anything. I also told her to take out the rings and put them in her pocket and mail them to me. Ashley laughed. I bet Jolene was mad, she said. Yes, Jessica has been a real fighter all along. She did what I asked, but Jolene went crazy trying to find those rings. She even asked Steve to come and help her search. They rummaged through the trash, opened traps under sinks, whatever. I wish I could have been there to record it. So what did you do next? Ashley asked. Well, my course finished on Friday afternoon, so I went straight home and arrived on Saturday evening. Jolene met me outside, crying that she had lost her grandmother's ring. She was absolutely beside herself. I asked all the usual questions like, did you look everywhere? Did you leave them on the sink? And so on. She continued to insist that she looked everywhere. Then I reached into my pocket and took them out. I thought she would faint. How did you find them? She asked. I simply said that a trusted friend found them and mailed them to me. I never mentioned Jessica's role because I thought she would tear the girl apart. I just told her, don't put them in the ashtray next time Steve comes over. It was priceless. Her eyes got huge and she started crying, saying all the usual stupid things about how she loves me. Oh, sorry, I said when I saw the look on Ashley's face. I didn't mean to fight. It's okay, she said. I've heard and said much worse things, believe me. So what did you do next? Well, I knew then that it was over between us, I said. I had no real evidence of them cheating, no photographs or anything like that. I decided to start investigating and preparing. The first thing I wanted to do was do DNA tests. I needed to find out if the children were mine. I also took some spy equipment from our store. High-definition cameras with motion detection, audio recording voice-activated devices, all that stuff. I even bugged our phone. All this went to my home server, which was then backed up in the cloud. I waited until she went shopping and installed it all. The DNA tests were quite simple. One of our clients in Dallas is a lab that does these tests, and they gave me everything I needed. I took samples from the children, asking them not to tell their mother anything. Took my sample and waited for the next Sunday when Steve came. As usual, he had fallen asleep in his chair, so it was quite easy to swab the inside of his cheek. It took me a week to get the results because I asked the lab to send them to work. Of course, the tests showed a 99.9% chance that Steve was the father of both children, which meant that he and Jolene had been together for at least 16 years, if not more. And all this time you didn't have the slightest suspicion? Ashley asked. No, no suspicions. I think if I sat down and analyzed everything carefully, I could figure it out, but that's the point. Until that moment, she had never given me any reason to doubt her fidelity. Our sex life has always been good, even after having children. So I waited to get some other evidence. And it didn't take long. A week after I installed all the equipment, I received the first video evidence. I was sent to Oklahoma City to install a server, and I knew I would be there for a couple of days. The children were with their parents, so Jolene was left alone. Shortly after I left, she called Steve and arranged for him to come over for the night. I called her from my hotel in Oklahoma City and spoke briefly, just to let her know I was there. She said she loved me, but by that point I didn't care. After this call, I logged into my home server and waited. Sure enough, around 9 p.m., they were in our bed having sex. The worst thing was listening to what they said after sex. What did they say? Ashley asked. Wait, I said. We need to take this exit. Then another 30 minutes. I had to focus on this part of the trip. It was getting pretty dark, and there were no lights, no guardrails, or white lines marking the edges on this road. Someone who doesn't look carefully could easily end up in a ditch or worse. In addition, this road passed near the place where Steve's cronies operated, smuggling illegal substances. Most of them were arrested or otherwise taken out of the game after Steve's arrest, but I was always on my guard. I had to replace my windshield a couple of times after it was shot. Plus, there were a lot of animals, mostly armadillos and deer. I turned on the high beams and turned on the light strip on top of the cab. I then turned on the police scanner and CB radio and removed my pistol from the glove box. I wasn't going to take any risks. We finally got to my house, and Ashley noticed a DPS car parked in the driveway. "Who is this?" she asked. "Security," I said. "They've been keeping an eye on the place since Steve's arrest. Some of his friends thought they could burn the place down in revenge, but we stopped them. To death." I patted the gun in its holster. She understood what I meant. "Will we be safe here?" she asked. I nodded. "Yes," I said. "We have 24-hour security. DPS is also monitoring my parents and children. I think we've arrested most of Steve's friends, but we're not taking any chances. Hell, they had to fire almost the entire sheriff's department. Let's come in and I'll introduce you." After I pulled into the garage, Ashley and I got out of the truck and headed to the patrol car. The DPS officer came out and approached us. "Bill Jennings," he asked, "thought you were in Dallas for a trial." We shook hands. "The trial just went to the jury this afternoon. By the way, this is Ashley Marks, a reporter for the Austin Statesman. She'll be with me for the weekend, researching material for a story about Steve," I said. He touched the brim of his gray hat, nodding to her. "Nice to meet you, madam," he said, smiling. Then he looked at me again. "Everything is quiet for now. Nothing has happened since the Rangers took out this last gang. But you never know. My replacement will arrive soon." "Thank you," I said. We shook hands and went our separate ways. "Have a nice evening, guys," he said as we headed for the door. "Same to you," I said. "Goodbye." When we walked into the house, I turned on the coffee maker and gave Ashley a little tour of the house. The original house was built in 1866 by William Bryan Jennings after his return from the Civil War on the Confederate side. The house had been extended, remodeled, and modernized many times, but in some places the original structures, dating back 150 years, could still be seen. Today, the house had 5 bedrooms on 2 floors and a 3-car garage with a wraparound porch. Each of the 2 children had their own bedroom, a master bedroom. One room was converted into a sewing and craft room for Jolene, and the other room was set up as a play-TV room for the children. I suggested Ashley sleep in the master bedroom since it is the only one with a private bathroom, and I thought she would appreciate the privacy. I could sleep on the futon in my downstairs office, as I had done since I found out about Jolene's affair. However, Ashley didn't want to hear about it. "Ridiculous," she said. "This bed is big enough for 4 people. There's plenty of room, and we're both adults capable of self-control." It stunned me. "Okay, if you say so," I said. She smiled and led me down the stairs. "You have a story to tell, so let's get started," she said. "Let me call the kids first so they know we're coming tomorrow," I said. I called my parents' house and spoke with the father and then with the children. They were excited to hear about Ashley, so we agreed to come over for lunch. I got us some coffee and went into the living room. After I set the cups down, I remembered the stack of DVDs, so I took them out of the office, where they were locked up. "That should help a lot," I said. Her eyes widened. "Oh my God, how many videos do you have?" she asked. "Quite a lot," I said. "Some of them are from here in the house, some are from security cameras in my office. I also have scans of all documents, many photographs and audio recordings. So everything I have is here, and I have several copies just in case." I took out the disc, made sure it was the right one, and inserted it into the DVD player. "I warn you, this is pretty explicit," I said. I'm ready, she said. I reminded her that this was the same DVD that confirmed my suspicions. I also reminded her to listen carefully to what was said. I pressed play, and the video started with Jolene walking into the master bedroom, followed by Steve. There was a lot of foreplay as they undress each other. Jolene took off her rings and threw them into the ashtray on my nightstand. Steve put out his cigarette on the rings, smiling. Fuck him and his great-grandmother's ring, Jolene said. Steve laughed. Ashley grimaced, tears welling in her eyes. I rewinded to the more explicit parts, a gesture Ashley seemed to appreciate. There's about an hour of this, I said. It was bad enough, but the pillow talk afterwards was murder. Thanks for missing that, Ashley said. It's one thing to hear that someone you love and care about is cheating, but it's another thing entirely to see it happen. Finally, I got to the part where they were lying on their backs, smoking a cigarette. Steve put his cigarette out again on Jolene's rings. Jolene turned on her side, facing Steve. I'm pregnant again, honey. Looks like you're going to be a dad again, she said. Steve frowned. Damn, didn't you take your pills? He asked. Yes, maybe I missed a day or two, but mostly I took it. Looks like you'll have to get rid of the pregnancy again. It's either that or convince the dumbass it's his baby. I can't do this again, Steve, she said. I did this 3 times, and the last time I almost died. I was so sick that I ended up in intensive care. Plus, you know the idiot did the procedure after Jessica was born. It was your idea so he could never get me pregnant again. Well, what do you want to do? Steve asked. I want to go and marry you, she said. This is all I ever wanted, and I think Bill already suspects something. I told you I'm not going to get married. Besides, having a family can complicate things for me, and I like the way things are now. Bill works and pays, and I get rewards, he said. And don't worry about him. Damn, he's so dumb. We could do this right in front of him, and he wouldn't notice. You can't just, do to him what you did to those other guys, she said. Well, those other guys were illegals. Nobody will look for them. Besides, who would cry for some dirty criminal who is illegally in the country? Hell, I probably got half the votes by getting rid of these guys. It's one thing to order the murder of an illegal immigrant whom no one knows. It's another thing to do it with a respected member of society. Maybe you can arrange an accident, Jolene said. This isn't the first time, and you know people die on Indian Trail all the time. The people who die there are usually visitors looking for beautiful views, and they don't know the way like he does. Maybe we'll come up with something, but let's not kill him just yet. Maybe we can find something that will kill him slowly. Like poison. Let's just think about it a little before we decide. Either way, we'll have to get rid of him, but let's do it right and at the right time, maybe after the kids leave home. That way you'll get his insurance and most of his business. Meanwhile, you'll go to that new clinic in Abilene. They will take better care of you than those charlatans you went to last time. I'll keep an eye on Billy. If he looks like he's going to do something stupid, like go to a lawyer, I'll talk to him and put him in his place. Fine? Jolene nodded. Okay, honey, I'll do it. You are a man, she said, kissing him. I stopped the video. Ashley shook her head, tears streaming down her face. I hate that bitch, she said. And you stayed with her for 17 years? Please tell me you went to a lawyer after that. Yes, I went to a lawyer. It was another day. Let me tell you about it, I said, starting my story. In fact, I went to a lawyer. As I told Ashley, I made an appointment with Alan Jackson, an attorney who had handled all of our family and business legal matters for many years. What I learned at this meeting gave me chills. I remembered my visit to Alan's office. After the initial greetings, I got straight to the point, showing him just some of the evidence I had, including the DNA report and the video of Jolene cheating with Steve. Alan explained what I could expect. Although Texas is a community property state, divorce can be granted on grounds of adultery or abuse. Although adultery is not a crime in Texas, it can affect a judge's decisions about property distribution and alimony. It can also be used in civil proceedings. But as Alan told me, The biggest problem I face is not the law. Legally, he said, I definitely have a winning case. The problem, he added, was Steve. Listen, Bill, he told me, Steve runs this country with an iron fist. He's in control of the sheriff's department and every judge in the district. And in Texas, you must file in the county where you lived for the last 90 days. Frankly, I don't think there is a judge in this county who will even consider your case. Additionally, Jolene's pregnancy may delay the process. Texas courts will not finalize a divorce until the child is born. It doesn't matter who the father is. They do this so that all support orders can be factored into the final decision. One last thing, Bill. Steve has made it clear that you may be considering divorcing Jolene. He made it clear that we must inform him of any attempt to initiate a divorce. Wait a minute, I said. Are you saying that Steve ordered you to break attorney-client privilege and possibly even break the law by refusing to report a crime? Alan nodded. I'm afraid so, Bill. I don't like it at all, but I don't want to end up in a shallow grave somewhere on Indian Trail, if you know what I mean. You have no idea what you're up against, he said. Sorry, Bill. I have no choice. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I'm sorry too, Alan. Looks like I have no choice either. You're fired. Right now. I want all the family and business-related files along with any backups you have, and I want them now, I said. I assumed that would be your reaction, so I took the liberty of collecting them all, he said, pointing to 2 boxes of documents by the door. He pulled out a piece of paper, made some notes, and handed it to me. Thank you, he said, realizing that I had given him a way out. One more time, he said. I'm really sorry. I thought you were friends with him. Isn't there some way to reconcile with Jolene? For the sake of the children, you know? Would you be able to come to terms with being secretly deceived for 17 years? I asked him. Probably not, he said. Let me help you take out these documents. It's the least I can do. He took the boxes of documents while I closed my briefcase and walked with me to the truck. Once we got there, he looked back before speaking again. Call the people I wrote down on that paper I gave you, Bill. I didn't want to say anything in the office just in case, but the authorities are very interested in some of Steve's actions. Don't waste your time, please, he said. For all I know, Steve might be following you. Once again, I'm very sorry. Maybe after all this, we can meet and reconnect. I shook his hand. Thank you, Alan. I understand. We'll be in touch. I went back to the office, thinking about what Alan had said. I wasn't too worried about Alan leaving because I knew my father would support my decision. My biggest concern was with Steve and what he or his minions might do to the family. I called the numbers Alan had given me and made appointments with each of the 3 men. One was an expensive, high-profile family law attorney with a well-deserved reputation as a bloodthirsty shark, another was a government attorney, and the third was a senior officer in the Texas Rangers. They were all in Dallas. I spoke with my father and told him that I had fired Alan as our lawyer. He took it calmly. Why the hell did you do that? He asked. I explained to him what Alan said, then showed him the DNA evidence and the video I showed Alan. His tone changed significantly. Holy heavens, he said. I suspected Steve was a snake, but I didn't think it was that bad. You need to get the kids out of the house. There's no telling what they might do. I agreed, but didn't know what excuse to use for this. Father already had a plan. When do you have meetings in Dallas? He asked. I told him that the meeting was scheduled for tomorrow. Great. Tell Jolene I'm sending you to Phoenix for a site inspection, and you might be gone for a few days. I'll go home with you just in case. Let the children pack their things, and they will live with us. Hopefully this will confuse them for a while, he said. Are you planning to tell the kids about this? I have to, Dad. They deserve to know the truth, I said. I'm not going to talk bad about the mother, but they're old enough to make their own decisions. Okay, son, you do as you see fit, and Mom and I will support you, he said. I called Brian on his cell phone and explained that he and Jessica would be staying with their grandparents for a while, starting today. What's going on, Dad? He asked. I'll tell you later, just make sure you and your sister are home right after school, I said. Grandpa will pick you up from there. Okay, Dad, we'll be there, he said. Love you guys, I said. I could almost hear his face turn red with embarrassment. Love you too, Daddy, he whispered. A few minutes later, I heard from my secretary. Bill, Steve Jenkins is here to see you, she said. I took the gun out of its holster, placed it on the table where it was easy to reach, turned on the video to record the meeting, and told the secretary to send it and let my father know he was here. Steve walked into the office like a boss and immediately saw the 9mm pistol on my desk. What kind of weapon do you have? I didn't know computer scientists used pistols, he said. What do you need, Steve? I asked. Straight to the point. Fine. Look, I know you went to see Alan Jackson today, he said. So what? What do you care about? I asked. If you're thinking about divorcing Jolene, forget it, he said. I don't care if you know about her and me, but I'll be damned if I let you drag me into the mud in court. Tell me, Steve, why? I thought we were friends. Why did you and Jolene do this? How long has this been going on? How long? He asked. This is a good option. You'll love it. We actually started during our prom. You remember this, don't you? Ashley was my date for the evening, but Jolene and I snuck away for a while and did it. You were dancing with Ashley when we got back, remember? Hell, we were all 18 at the time, so we weren't doing anything illegal. Then we met again while you were at Quantico. Remember when I twisted my knee in Pendleton? We did this quite often until you came back, he said. You were my best man, asshole, I said. I was hers too. I have to admit, I really enjoyed seeing her walk down the aisle. She was so beautiful. Better yet, I knew she was pregnant with Brian, he said. Isn't that a kick in the ass? Of course, we didn't meet again until you brought her home on vacation. This was just before you went to Okinawa. Yes, Jolene and I had a good time. We spent almost every night together while you were there. She became pregnant after about 6 months, but lost the pregnancy. I didn't want you to come home to your pregnant wife. Hell, I even slept with her the day your plane landed. And guess what? 9 months later, Jessica arrived, he said. By the way, it was my idea for Jolene to make you do the procedure. We didn't want her to have any of your children. I decided it would be too difficult to keep track of who was the father of which child. Jolene screwed up and had to go to the obstetrician a couple of times over the years. All these years we had a wonderful business going on until you decided to become smart. You couldn't just leave things as they were. No, you needed to be outraged and righteous. So this is how it's going to be. Now that you know about us, there is no need for divorce, and we don't need to hide it. From now on, I will come anytime I want, day or night. And when I am there, you will remember that I am the master of the house. You will do what I say, when I say, and how I say. And if you have any ideas in your crazy little head about how to stop me, just think about the kids. I wouldn't want anything bad to happen to them. You bastard, I said. If you touch one hair on these children, I will put you down like a rabid dog. I don't care if it's the last fucking thing I'll ever do. Talk all sorts of nonsense, Steve said. Just remember who's in charge. Damn, I own the fucking county. I own the sheriff's department, and I own every damn judge in the courthouse. And now I own you. You play ball and everything will be fine. For you and the children. Are you threatening your own children? I asked. What the hell happened to you? I've grown, Steve said. And you better grow up too, Bunny. See you. Steve left the office and I stopped recording. I burned it to DVD, sent a copy of the video to my father and my friends in Dallas, and called my father. Dad, check your email. We better move now, I said. He just threatened me and the kids. Okay, said my father. Let me call. You call Brian and ask him to pick up Jess and come to my house. Notify the school and I'll meet you at home. I think it's time to evict your wife. I agreed and called the school, saying that under no circumstances should my wife or Steve Jenkins pick them up or even be in the building, explaining that this could be a matter of life and death. I also informed them that the children needed to leave immediately. I called Brian and told him to pick Jess up immediately and go straight to Grandpa's house, no questions asked. I'll tell you kids later today, I promise, I told him. And under no circumstances should you have any contact with your mother or Steve. This is extremely important. You understand? Yes, Dad, I understand. What's happening? He asked. There's no time to explain now, son. Just do as I say, okay? Okay, Dad, he said. I grabbed the gun, grabbed the DVD I had just burned, walked out of the office, and jumped into my truck. I knew my father would arrive soon, so I didn't wait. If he said he was going to be somewhere, that's exactly what would happen. I pulled out and headed home. About 15 minutes later, I arrived at my house. I didn't see Steve's truck, but Jalene's car was there. Fine. I knew my father would be there soon. I walked into the house and looked around for Steve or anyone else who might be waiting to harm me. I kept my right hand on the gun in the holster. At first, I didn't see or hear anyone. I carefully stepped into the house. Jalene walked down the stairs. "Bill, you came home early," she said. "Something happened?" I looked at her, not saying anything at first. "Is Steve or anyone else here?" I asked. "Why does Steve have to be here?" she answered. "I think you know. Maybe to have some fun after dinner or to plan my murder," I said. Jalene's eyes widened and her hand flew to her mouth. "Yes, Jalene, I know." "Oh my God," she said. "I'm sorry." "Nonsense. Let me show you what your lover just told me, and then I'll give you 30 seconds to grab your shit and get the hell out of my house," I said. I put the DVD in the player, turned on the TV, and pressed play on the remote. I watched Jalene's reaction to Steve's confession and threat. "Bill, it's not what you think," she said. "Please let me explain. Steve was just talking nonsense. We will get through this." "Are you fucking kidding me, bitch? You conspire with Steve from the beginning to cuckold me, then you conspire with him to rob me of my children, and then you conspire with Steve to kill me. Now your lover is threatening to kill his own children if I do not obey him. What the hell kind of people are you? Now take your shit and go." I never raised my voice to her, but she was clearly scared. I reached out and took the wedding rings off her finger. I put my great-grandmother's ring in my pocket, took off my ring, and handed it to her. "Chew it, bitch," I barked. "Bill, please don't do this to me." "I'm sorry," she sobbed through tears. "Yes, you're sorry. You are a pathetic excuse for a wife. Now get out of here." I grabbed her bag and threw it at her chest. She headed towards the door. I urged her on. "Move the damn thing," I said. I was tempted to kick her, but I was raised to never lay a hand on a woman. We went outside and approached her car. She turned to me as she opened the door. "Where will I go?" she asked, crying. "First of all," I said, "stop whining, damn it. You get what you want. Secondly, I don't care. Go to Steve, to your mother, or best of all, go to hell." After that, I noticed two cars pulling into the driveway. My dad's truck stopped first, followed by Steve's. Jalene immediately stopped crying and grinned at me. "Now let's see who evicts whom, honey," she said sarcastically. "It would be a lot easier if you just obeyed us. Now you and the children will beg us to die when we are done with you." "Would you really kill me and the children?" I asked. "In one damn moment," she said. "Don't worry, we'll give you a real show." The father turned his truck to block Steve's access to the house and stopped. Steve slammed on the brakes, stopping a few feet from his father's truck. Steve got out of his truck. Father, too. He pulled out his double-barreled shotgun, pulled the bolt back, and pointed the gun at Steve. "What the hell are you doing, Jennings?" Steve shouted. "I'm complying with the protective order," my father said. "What protection order?" Steve asked. "One that requires you and your mistress to stay 500 feet away from my family and any property controlled by the Jennings Family Historic Trust, which includes this house," the father said. "And believe me, bastard, I would love to blow your fucking head off right now. So just get in your truck and get out of here." Steve was not used to this kind of treatment and froze. Two cars with lights flashing pulled into the driveway, stopping behind Steve's truck. 4 DPS officers came out with their guns drawn. "We can handle this, Mr. Biz Jennings," one of the officers said as he approached Steve. The father lowered his gun as the officer handed Steve a protective order. "That's her?" he asked, nodding towards Jolene. The father nodded. The officer walked up to Jolene and me and handed her the paper. "Mrs. East Jennings, you have been served with a warrant requiring you to remain 500 feet away from any member of the Jennings family and any property controlled by the Jennings Family Heritage Trust, including this home," he said. "If you refuse to comply with this warrant, you will be detained. You understand?" "Yes, I understand," Jolene said quietly. "Sorry, officer," I said as he began to walk away. He stopped and looked at me. "Yes, Mr. Jennings," he asked. I took the digital voice recorder out of my shirt pocket. "I would appreciate it if you would arrest Jolene and Mr. Jenkins," I said. "And why should I do this?" he asked. I pressed play and let them hear Jolene's threat against me and the children. Jolene looked like she was going to start crying. The officer looked at her carefully before pulling out handcuffs. "Mrs. Jennings, you are under arrest. Please turn around and put your hands behind your back," he said. After he handcuffed Jolene and read her Miranda rights, he radioed another officer and ordered him to arrest Steve. "You're going to pay for this, you bastard," Jolene said as she was led away in handcuffs. "You'll all pay for this." By this time, another vehicle had entered the driveway. The news station van stopped, and the reporter and cameraman began walking up the driveway as Steve was being arrested. They managed to film his arrest, and it made the evening news. Steve was, to put it mildly, unhappy. "Damn it, do you know who I am?" he asked the officer handcuffing him. "Yes, sir, I do," the officer said. "And frankly, I don't care. You are still under arrest." "I'll take your badge for this," Steve shouted. I realized that I should have mentioned their plot to kill me and the children, but I didn't have that evidence with me. Some of it was still in the DVD player in the house, and things moved pretty quickly. However, I knew that my contacts in Dallas had evidence and were working on charges. The news van pulled away, making room for the patrol cars to enter the road. The reporter and her cameraman approached me and my father. "Mr. Jennings, can you explain why Commissioner Jenkins was arrested?" she asked. "Yes, I can," I said. "Last time I checked, threatening to kill is still a crime, and even popular politicians like Steve and his married girlfriend are subject to the law. Now, if you don't mind, I need to take care of the children." I walked away and my father joined me, leaving the reporter and her cameraman in shock. Steve was well known to the voters of our district, and I knew that his reputation as a man of family values had just taken a serious hit. Unfortunately, voters didn't know Steve the way I did, but I'll make sure they know. My next stop was at my parents' house, where I had to explain everything to the rest of my family. I hated telling my children that the man they knew as Uncle Steve was actually their biological father, but I felt they deserved to know the truth. They didn't want to believe it at first, but I had the DNA results to prove it. "I don't care what that piece of paper says," Jessica said. "You are my father, and you always will be." "I agree," Brian said. "I loved those kids and was so proud of them, even if Steve was their biological father." We hugged and cried. After saying goodbye to my kids and parents, I returned home, packed enough to last me a couple of days, and headed to Dallas. "And that's when you found out how bad it was?" Ashley asked, interrupting my story. "Yes," I said, continuing my story after a sip of coffee. The next day I met with Dave Brooks, a well-known attorney in Dallas with a reputation as a ruthless shark who usually gets his way in court. I didn't know that he had arranged a meeting with all 3 men I contacted. I was quite surprised to see them all when I showed up at his office early that morning. "Sorry for the ambush, Mr. Jennings," Dave said, "but after that last video you sent us, we decided it would be better if we all got together at once." I accepted his apology, and he introduced me to the other 2 men. John Hancock, a prosecutor from the state attorney general's office, shook my hand, and took charge of the meeting. "Mr. Jennings, let me start by apologizing for what you've been through," he said. "There's no easy way to say this, so I'll just say it straight. We have evidence, and a lot of it, that Steve Jenkins is not only involved in a number of criminal activities, but that your wife helped him do it. We have evidence that he is involved in trafficking illegal substances, weapons, people, and slavery. Moreover, the examination links him to at least 6 murders. Moreover, your wife is involved in many of these activities. We hoped that we would have a little more time to prepare everything, but the threats against you and your children forced us to speed up our actions," he said. The third man, Don Jacobs, captain of the Texas Rangers, gave a brief overview from his side. He made it clear to me that the entire sheriff's department was compromised and unable to perform its duties. As a result, he said, arrangements are being made to temporarily fill the department with Rangers and DPS officers until replacements can be hired and trained. Unfortunately, this includes the correctional facilities where Jenkins and your wife are being held, he said. So we need to act quickly before the situation gets worse. As for your divorce, Dave said, I will seek an annulment given your wife's criminal actions and the deception she and Jenkins used against you. If this fails, we will file for divorce on the grounds of adultery and mental abuse. Based on the information you provided, I believe that you will receive all of your assets as well as custody of the children if that is what you want. We talked for about another hour, discussing strategy and possible scenarios. Dave gave me a DVD that he said contained videos of my wife's activities taken by private and government investigators. Some of them, he said, were quite explicit and involved several men, including sheriff's deputies. John concluded by saying what he was going to do with Steve and Jolene. I'm not going to sugarcoat it, Mr. Jennings, he said. I'm seeking the death penalty here, at least for Jenkins. Your wife might get lucky and get life without parole. But I must warn you, he added, your life and the lives of your family members are in danger. Be very careful. From what I have seen, you and your children are very lucky to be alive right now. People who cross these two usually end up dead. You have our direct numbers, so if you see something or suspect, call us immediately, understand? Got it, I said. We shook hands and went our separate ways. There was a fog in my head. The man I once considered my best friend was involved in everything imaginable, and my so-called loving wife was part of it all. The drive home was spent thinking about what had happened over the past 17 years. How could I not notice this? Was I really that blinded by love and friendship? Finally, I returned to the city and received a disturbing call from my son. Dad, you need to come home now, Brian said. What's happened? I asked. Just come home now, he said as he hung up. I hit the gas and got home in about 20 minutes. I saw the ambulance and DPS patrol cars in front of the house and immediately thought about what I had been told. I rushed to the door just as the paramedics were wheeling out the stretcher. I stopped them to find out what happened. One of the paramedics lifted the corner of the sheet, revealing Jolene's face. Sorry, Mr. Jennings, the paramedic said. She died. Strangely, I wasn't too upset. I entered the house and saw Steve being lifted onto another stretcher. He was still alive. I saw the children and my father standing to the side. Thank God they seemed okay, I thought. I walked around them and hugged them all, making sure they were okay. What's happened? I asked. The father answered. I brought the kids here to pick up a few things, he said. We were here a few minutes when these two came into the house. I think they managed to make bail. Jessica and Jolene grappled and Steve pulled out a gun. I heard a noise and went in through the back door. Brian and I were in the backyard packing up. I grabbed my shotgun and walked in here just as Steve pulled out his gun and Jolene tried to get him to put it down and it went off. I think he shot Steve and called 911. Then Brian called you. Jolene didn't live long. She was dead by the time the paramedics arrived. Sorry, son, he said. I shook my head. It's okay, Dad, I said. You did the right thing. Then I remembered that my security system was still working on my home server. I checked, and sure enough, the entire incident was recorded on video. I showed the video to one of the officers while the other took statements from my father and children. He asked me to make a copy, and I did. I stopped my story to take another sip of coffee. Ashley wiped away her tears as I stood up from the couch. "I'm pretty tired of this by now, if you don't mind," I said. "I think I'll go out into the backyard and have a smoke and then go to bed." Ashley stood up and followed me. "I'll join you if you don't mind," she said. We poured a fresh cup of coffee and walked out onto the back porch. We were silent for some time. Ashley was the first to break the silence. "I forgot how dark and quiet it is," she said. "I guess I'm already used to city life." She looked at me before continuing. "Bill, you need to close this chapter or it will tear you apart," she said. "Easier said than done," I replied. "How do you cope with the fact that the woman you loved all these years lied to you all this time? I feel like I've been cheated for life. My kids aren't even mine, damn it." "I know a little about how you feel," she said. "Remember, my husband was a serial cheater, but not everyone is like them." "Yes, I know," I said quietly. Ashley hugged me, trying to comfort me. "No matter what happens, Bill, just know that I'm here for you, okay? I'll always be here for you." I hugged her back and thanked her. It was comforting to have her around, and she seemed very good around me. "I can't tell you how many times I wished we were in school together," she said. I thought the same thing. Maybe if my dad hadn't been transferred to Austin, we would have been together, and none of this would have happened. You know, I was a little jealous of Jolene back then. "Is it true?" I asked. "But you were with Steve." "We only dated because you and Jolene were together at the time. But I had my doubts even then. I knew Steve wasn't the one to stick with just one girl. He even told me," she said. "Well, there's no point in crying about it now," I said. "Besides, if we were together, you wouldn't be the big city reporter." "PFFT," she said. "Yes, of course. You know, there are times when I would give up all this to be with a good man," she added, looking at me. I looked at her. "You know, I believe you would," I said. We returned to the house after a while and got ready to call it a day. I decided to sleep on the couch, as I did a lot. Even though a DPS officer was stationed outside, I was still worried that some of Steve's henchmen might get inside. Plus, I was still a little unsure about where the relationship with Ashley might go and didn't want to force things, considering I'd only slept with one woman my entire adult life. Luckily, Ashley understood this. "Just don't make a habit of it, cowboy," she said, smiling. I lay down and fell fast asleep, waking up to the smell bacon. "Rise and shine," Ashley said, standing over me in a long t-shirt. "Breakfast is ready, so go and eat." I got up from the couch and headed to the kitchen table, where I saw a real feast in front of me. Ashley did her best with pancakes, bacon, sausage, corn grits, toast, eggs, biscuits, and gravy. My favorite breakfast. She even remembered to put peanut butter on the table. I'm one of those guys who loves peanut butter on pancakes. "The guy can get used to it," I said. Ashley walked over to the table with fresh coffee kana. "Have you been awake for a long time?" "Not for long. I hope you like it," she said. "It's been a long time since I cooked breakfast for a man." "Smells amazing. You definitely get my mom's approval for this," I said. "I'm impressed. Is this how you cooked for your husband?" I said a man. My ex-husband thought breakfast was scrambled eggs at some fast food place, she said. "Get started eating, cowboy. We have a lot to do today," she added, smiling. "So what's on our agenda?" I asked, enjoying the treat on my plate. "Well," she said, "I'd like to see your family today, so I thought we could visit Jolene's mother. I thought she might give some insight into Jolene's thoughts. Then, if I have time, I'd like to stop by the cemetery and take a photo of the burial site." Jolene. "And by the way, if you're expecting a breakfast like this tomorrow morning, we need to stop at the store. You're almost out of everything," she said. I ate my meal as if I hadn't eaten in a week, pausing only for sips of coffee and verbal thanks for Ashley's cooking skills. Jolene hadn't made a breakfast like this in years, and I felt like I'd died and gone to heaven. I finished my meal feeling more satisfied than I had in a long time. I stood up and hugged Ashley, thanking her for the wonderful breakfast. It was absolutely fantastic, I told her. I think it's time for me to go and get ready. Please do it, she said. You're gorgeous, but you need to shave. I went upstairs and thought about Ashley while I showered and shaved. In less than 24 hours, I realized that I was falling in love with her, just like in school. Maybe me and Ashley are destined to be together. For the first time in months, I felt content. Ashley took another shower upstairs and dressed in jeans and a t-shirt. She looked almost the same as she did then, a long time ago. Grabbing her laptop bag and purse, she hurried me along. We drove to my parents' house and were greeted by children who ran out of the house as soon as I arrived. I introduced everyone to Ashley and we went into the living room. Ashley explained what she wanted to do and asked if she could talk to everyone one by one in private. We all agreed, so my mom excused herself and went to the kitchen to prepare dinner while my dad took me to the office. Ashley started with Jessica, and after spending an hour with her, she had a long conversation with Brian. Dad and I waited, passing the time talking about manly things, hunting, fishing, football, you know what. We both avoided anything to do with Jolene and Steve. A couple of hours later, Ashley came into the office and asked to speak with my father. I took the hint, grabbed the kids, and went outside to throw the ball. It took a little over an hour, but she finished with both my parents and came out to join us until dinner was ready. The kids really hit it off with Ashley, and she seemed to enjoy spending time with us. We split into two teams and played a short touch match. Jessica and I were a team against Ashley and Brian, and we had a great time until Mom said dinner was ready. It was nice to relax with Ashley and the kids, and for a while, I felt like I had a happy family again. After lunch, we said goodbye and prepared to leave. Jessica caught up with me before I walked out the door. "Dad," she whispered, hugging me, "if you don't ask her to marry you, I swear I'll kick you." What could I say? I promised that I would seriously consider this. "How did your interview go?" I asked Ashley after we left. "Very good, thank you," she said. "Bill, I know trust is a real issue for you right now, so I'd like to explain why I interviewed everyone separately." She was very perceptive, perhaps the result of those same reporter instincts. It's good journalistic practice to get independent confirmation, you know. It's not that I didn't believe you, I did, and I do. I saw those videos of you, remember? But I wanted everyone to feel free to express their thoughts without any outside influence. "I hope you understand," she said. In fact, I understood, and the fact that she offered an explanation herself, without waiting for me to say anything, meant a lot to me. "I understand, Ashley. You do your job and you're a professional. So, did you learn anything new?" "Actually, yes," she said. "I learned that your family loves you very much and thinks you are a wonderful person," she added. They also loved Jolene, but they had problems with her, and they suspected that something was going on. They didn't say anything because they didn't want to interfere with your marriage. I think if they knew anything specific, they would have said something. "What else did you find out?" I asked. "I learned what it means to be part of a close family, and I really enjoyed it," she said. "I really enjoyed spending time with you and the kids. Thanks for including me in it." "Cheers," I said. "The kids and I had a great time too. I think you made a big impression on them." We pulled up to the apartment complex where Jolene's mother, Myrna, lived, parked, and headed out the door. "Do you want to interview her in private too?" I asked. "I don't think it's necessary," she said. "Besides, something tells me that you and her should talk about all this." Myrna Carter opened the door after the first knock and invited us inside. She moved slowly, partly because of her health and partly because of depression. Her husband Jolene's father died several years ago in a mysterious accident, and with Jolene's death, she was left alone with no close relatives. "How are you feeling?" I asked, hugging her. "I'm managing, Bill, thanks for asking," she said. She hugged Ashley and looked at her carefully. "Ashley Marks, you are as beautiful now as you were in school." Thank you for coming to see the old woman. Ashley smiled as Myrna motioned for us to sit down. So what brings you here? She asked. I explained what Ashley was doing and Myrna nodded in approval. What can I tell you? She asked. Well, Mrs. Willie Carter, I'm curious about one thing. This affair between Jolene and Steve lasted throughout her entire marriage. You must have known about it. I'm curious, why didn't you tell Bill? Myrna looked down before answering. She looked embarrassed. Yes, I knew, she said. I'm sorry, Bill. I should have told you something. You didn't deserve what they did to you. How long did you know? I asked. Almost from the beginning, she said. Do you remember that year you spent in Okinawa? Steve practically lived with Jolene that entire year. They were careful that he wasn't in the house when your parents were around. I told her she was making a huge mistake, but she refused to listen to me. So, I began, if Jolene wanted to be with Steve so much, why did she marry me? I would have let her go if she said she wanted to be with him. She was a confused girl, Bill. She really loved you both, but in different ways. You see, to her, you were stable, reliable, a good husband and father. Steve, on the other hand, wanted nothing to do with parenting children. He was always a wild child and did not want to be tied down. You were her rock, and he was her sense of adventure. Sorry, Myrna, I said. Jolene slept with Steve on our wedding day. She had 2 children with him and passed them off as mine. In the end, she planned to kill us all. These are not the actions of a loving wife. I know it's hard to believe, Bill, Myrna said, but she loved you, at least in the beginning. At least that's what she told me. And what happened? Ashley asked. What changed Jolene so much? Well, Ashley, people change over time, I guess, Myrna said. Steve had Jolene on his hook, and over time he had complete control over her. I told her this once, but she warned me that if I said anything to Bill, I would regret it. Myrna looked at me. That's why I stopped coming over to see your kids, Bill. I'm sorry, but I just couldn't come and look you in the eye knowing what Jolene was doing. I knew I'd probably say something that would piss them off. They just scared me to death sometimes. I told her to do the right thing and divorce Bill. She laughed and said she would never get a divorce. She said it wouldn't be long before she inherited everything Bill had. How long ago was it? Ashley asked. I don't know, maybe a year and a half ago, Myrna said. We let this information hang in the air for a few seconds. So Jolene and Steve have been planning to kill me for a long time. I wanted to say something, Bill, but I was so afraid. You know how scary Steve could be. I knew. Something about all of this was bothering me, so I spoke up. Myrna, did your husband know about all this? I asked. I think so, she said. I know he had words with Steve just before the accident. Myrna's husband was known as one of the best mechanics in the area, and he took very good care of all his cars. Investigators called the accident an accident, but were unable to explain how one brake hose mysteriously failed or how the steering linkage mysteriously became loose. I guess it's all water under the bridge now, isn't it? Myrna asked. I don't blame you and the kids for not coming to the memorial service, by the way, especially after what she did to you. I was hoping at least a few of her old friends would come, but it was just me and the priest. She added, wiping a tear from her eye. I want to thank you, Bill, for paying for the cremation. I thought it was interesting that you had her wear a wedding dress. Ashley looked at me. You cremated her in her wedding dress? Really? Why? I told you that I burned her wedding dress. I just didn't tell you that she was wearing it at the time. I also made sure that she was wearing the wedding ring that I gave her. Honestly, I thought it was appropriate. I figured she didn't need our marriage, so. A little revenge after all. I understand. Did you cremate her wedding ring too? Ashley asked. But not a wedding ring. I nodded. She seemed slightly amused by this as she took notes. Anyway, Myrna said, I want to thank you for making sure I got Jolene's era. It really helped, considering I'm on a fixed income. Jolene had an era? Ashley asked. Yes, I said. At the time of her death, She had about $350,000. I didn't even know she had an era. She also had another $200,000 in a savings account, which I didn't know anything about either. I put that money in a trust fund to pay for the children's education. Don't ask me how she did it, because I honestly don't want to know. Interesting, she said, returning to her notes. She turned to Myrna. Mrs. Carter, is there anything else you can add? Myrna shook her head. There's nothing that jumps out at me. I think you all know quite a lot. Myrna looked at me. I'm so sorry it turned out this way, Bill. I hugged her. It's okay, Myrna. Look, come over and see the kids whenever you want, okay? I think they'll be glad to see you. She nodded and thanked me before hugging Ashley. Thank you for coming, she said as we prepared to leave. And please don't disappear, okay? We promised to keep in touch and left. You cremated her in her wedding dress and her wedding ring? Ashley asked as we got into the pickup truck. It seemed like the right thing to do at the time, I said. Ashley went back to her notes as I took the short route to the cemetery. We meandered through the manicured grounds until we reached the columbarium where her ashes were kept. The short granite monument had a plaque that simply read Jolene Carter and the years of her birth and death. Nothing else on the sign indicated who she was or what she represented. At least you treated her remains with some dignity, Ashley said. Well, I said, it was mostly for Myrna's sake. If it had been up to me, I would have simply flushed her ashes down the toilet. Interesting that you used her maiden name, she added. Yes, I have decided that since she did not value our family in life, I will not burden her with the family name for eternity, I said. They tried to get me to write something on the sign like loving wife and mother. I decided that they didn't engrave a cheating woman of easy virtue or a lying, scheming bitch, so I just kept it simple. Ashley took her photos and turned to me, placing her hand on my chest. There's still a lot of anger there, isn't there? Tell me, Bill, did you ever mourn her? At all? She asked. The truth was that I wasn't mourning. In fact, I haven't shed a single tear since she was shot. All the love I felt for her was burned away by her lies and betrayals. Her threats against the children and myself practically destroyed any feelings I had for her. Part of me felt shame, and it brought a tear to my eye. Damn it, I didn't want to cry in front of Ashley. I shook my head and started to turn away so Ashley wouldn't see me crying. She stopped me and made me turn to her. You need to let this out, Bill, before it destroys you, she said. Let it go so you can move on with your life. What's life like, Ashley? I asked. Everything I thought I had all these years turned out to be a lie. Everything. I shook my head and tears began to stream down my cheeks. Ashley hugged me and held me tightly. It worked. I cried uncontrollably for quite a long time. Ashley didn't say anything, but held me tightly the entire time, kissing my face every now and then. Finally, I calmed down and looked at Ashley. I wiped a tear from her cheek. What is this? I asked. She was my friend too, remember? The four of us, you, me, Steve, Jolene, the four musketeers. I loved her like a sister back then, she said. I hate what she became, but I still loved her. You loved her too for a long time. You married her, raised 2 children with her. That must mean something. I think you're right, I said. Damn it, cowboy. I'm here for you now, Bill, she added. And I'll be here as long as you need or want me, got it? I smiled. Got it, I told her. She smiled and patted my chest. We need to go to the store before it's too late, she said. What do you want to do about dinner? I thought for a moment before answering. How about a trip to Charlie's? I asked. They make a killer steak there, and there's a band coming tonight. Are you asking me out on a date? Right in front of your wife's ashes. Why not? I asked. She smiled, kissed me, and looked at Jolene's monument. Goodbye, Jolene, she said. Your husband is taking me on a date. I looked at the monument for a moment before returning to the pickup. Goodbye, darling, I whispered. I thought I heard a quiet sob next to me, but no one was there. I decided that it was the wind playing tricks on me, but I did not waste time and returned to the pickup truck, where Ashley was waiting for me. Are you okay? She asked. Yes, I said, starting the pickup. Let's go stock up on breakfast ingredients and get ready for the evening. We stopped at the farmer's market where we loaded up on eggs, bread, milk, bacon, and whatever else Ashley thought she needed and headed home. Home, what a concept. For a while, I thought of this place as just home, a place where I slept. But being here with Ashley felt natural. I showered, shaved, and dressed, then waited for Ashley to finish her preparations. She finally came down the stairs wearing a knee-length denim skirt and a white blouse. She completed the ensemble with some pretty expensive cowboy boots. A woman after my heart. She was beautiful, and tonight she was my companion. I offered her my hand, and together we walked out to our crew. Charlie's was well known in our area for its best steaks and sides. Potatoes and green beans with soft buns completed the meal. After dinner, we enjoyed a beer and watched the dancing couples on the dance floor. "Do you want to dance?" I asked. "Sure," Ashley said. We danced, and they danced, and they danced some more. We did two steps, some fast waltzes, some slow dances, and even took part in a line dance, which is something I haven't done in a long time. Ashley was with me the entire time, but took a couple of breaks to go to the ladies' room. We were slow dancing, holding each other, when Ashley stopped and kissed me. She leaned towards my ear. "I love you, Bill Jennings," she whispered. "I have always loved and will always love you." Here it is. And to be honest, I was falling in love with her too. "I love you too, Ashley Marks," I said. She licked her lips nervously for a moment. "Take me home and make love to me, cowboy," she said. "Otherwise, I won't be able to help but attack you right here." Who could refuse such an offer? "By the way," she said, "I have a confession. I'm not wearing anything underneath this. No bra, no panties, nothing." "Then we better get home and deal with this, little lady," I said in my best and worst John Wayne impersonation. She smiled, took my hand, and led me to the parking lot. "Take me home now," she whispered. "Whatever you say, baby," I said. I walked around the car and climbed into the driver's seat. We finally got home. At home, we made love. I thought about the events of the last 2 days. Just 36 hours ago, I was a depressed, desperate man dealing with the pain of being cheated on by a lying wife who repeatedly disrespected me with the man I once considered my best friend. Now I had Ashley to show me what it meant to love again. I knew what I wanted to do, but I was afraid she would think I was in too much of a hurry. To hell with it, I thought. Full speed ahead. I looked at her face, framed by her long dark hair. She looked at me. "A penny for your thoughts," she said. "I don't want this to ever end," I told her. "Me too," she said. "What do you suggest we do about it?" Interesting choice of words, I thought. Probably those damn reporter instincts again. I opened the drawer of my bedside table and pulled out a small box, the one that contained my great-grandmother's engagement ring. I took it to the jeweler for a thorough cleaning after I picked it up from Jeline. Ashley sat on the bed, her attention focused on the box. I told her about the ring and its meaning to me. The ring was originally given to my great-grandmother several years before my great-grandfather went to fight the Germans in World War I. He fought at the Battle of Belleau Wood in 1917 when the Marines earned the nickname Devil Dogs. He survived the war, but his life was significantly shortened by exposure to German gas. My great-grandmother passed the ring on to her eldest son, who gave it to his fiancée. After Pearl Harbor, he fought the Japanese in the Pacific and was wounded at Guadalcanal and Iwo Jima. My grandfather returned home, and they had two sons, one of whom was my father. As my grandmother approached the end of her life, my parents had been married for some time, so it was decided that the ring would go to me. So you see, Ashley, this ring not only represents my love for you, it also represents over 100 years of Jennings family history. I understand if you want a new ring, but I just want you to know what it means. For me, it's not just a family heirloom. Ashley looked at me, tears in her eyes. "Yes," she said, "both. I will marry you, and I promise to spend my life making you the happiest man in the world. And I will be proud to wear your great-grandmother's ring. There is only one condition. Condition? I asked. Yes, she said. Promise me that you will do the operation again to have the opportunity to have children. I plan to give you a house full of children. Maybe one day I can pass this ring on to one of our grandchildren. I smiled and put the ring on her finger. I woke up the next morning to the smell of the next best thing after sex bacon. I completed my morning chores and came downstairs to find a nearly naked Ashley cooking another one of her killer breakfasts. I kissed her and noticed that she was only wearing an apron. I don't want my breasts to get burned by hot bacon grease, she said, pointing to her breasts. We enjoyed breakfast and started packing for our trip back to Dallas. I decided to call the kids and tell them the news after we were finally dressed and packed. I dialed the number and put it on speaker so Ashley and I could hear their reactions together. Hooray! Brian shouted when I told them we were getting married. Jessica Wazel so working. Well done, Dad, she said. You've found a real gem. Congratulations, guys, my father said, and welcome to the family, Ashley. Thank you, Mr. Jennings, she said. Mr. Jennings was my father, he said, laughing. You can call me Daddy if you want. Okay, Dad, Ashley said. Thanks again. Ashley, I'm so happy for you both, my mother said. Have you chosen a date yet? Not yet, Ashley said. I need to take care of some things in Austin first, but that will be as soon as possible. I had one more matter that I wanted to discuss with the children. Brian, I said, you know, I think it would be nice if you and Jessica visited your Grandma Carter sometimes. Just stop by to say hi and let her know you're thinking about her. She's still your grandma, and she misses you. What do you say? Okay, Dad, he said. Well done, I told him. Brian and Jessica were great kids, and I knew they would do the right thing. We said our goodbyes and loaded up the pickup for the ride back. Something Ashley said to my mother couldn't get out of my head. I almost forgot, you work in Austin. What are your plans? Because long-distance relationships don't always work, I said. Well, did you know that Jake Carson will soon retire as managing editor of the Daily Record? She asked, referring to the local newspaper. I didn't know this, but I motioned for her to continue. Well, I sent in my resume last week before we met, and they are interested in talking to me about the job. He won't resign for about 3 months, and it will take me 2 months to wrap things up at the Statesman. What if you don't get the job? I asked. It's no big deal, she said. I'll quit and move in with a guy I know in the area, teased her. Anyway, I know no one else is particularly interested in the position, and the board is pretty set on having a woman there, especially with my level of experience. And I have a few ideas on how to improve the circulation. It sounds like you've thought it through, I said. Well, I like to be prepared, she said. No matter how it turns out, you know that I will support you 100%, right? I asked. She put her arms around my neck and looked into my eyes. And that's just part of why I love you so much, she said. Think about it. If I had stayed at the Statesman, there's no telling where I would have been sent, or for how long. I'd be called in the middle of the night and sent to the other side of the country to cover some dumb politician, then sent to the other end countries to cover something else. I was tired of living in hotels, so when I saw this opportunity, I jumped at it. It might not be a big salary increase. In fact, it might even be a pay cut, but it's worth it to stay in one place. And if I don't get that job, that's okay. I can always write online, maybe freelance, or even write a book. Maybe I'll start a blog about stupid people who cheat on their spouses. Personally, I'd rather spend all my time in bed with you. I like this plan best, I told her. Let's go. After we closed on the house, I picked some flowers from the flower bed in front of the house. If you don't mind, I'd like to make a stop along the way, I said. About? She asked. Do you have a friend hidden somewhere? You know you don't, I said. I knew she was only teasing, but the question still stung me. I didn't bring up this topic. You're right, I'm sorry, she said. We were both burned, so it's a sore subject for me too. Actually, I was thinking about what you said yesterday at the cemetery. I thought maybe it was time to start putting this behind me, I said. Well done, she replied. We hit the road and made a stop at the cemetery, parking next to where Jolene's ashes rested. We both got out of the car and headed towards the monument. I knelt down and placed flowers in a vase next to the monument. By the way, Jolene, Ashley, and I are getting married. Just thought you'd like to know, I said. Yes, I knew she was dead, but saying it out loud felt therapeutic. Ashley stood next to me and also spoke. And if the children don't mind, I plan to adopt them, she said. We both said our goodbyes and headed back to the car. Do you really want to adopt children? I asked. Hell yes, Ashley said. They deserve a mother they can trust. Is that okay with you? Of course not, I said. At that moment, I realized that marrying Ashley was the best thing that could happen to all of us. I thought she would make a wonderful mother, and I knew that Jessica would need a strong, loving mother during her teenage years. We were silent most of the way back to Dallas, and Ashley used the time to work on her article. She seemed to be enjoying the activity, and I had time to reflect on the events of the past few months. Finally, we arrived at the hotel and took our bags. You know, Ashley said, there's no point in you leaving your room. The newspaper is paying for mine until this case is over, so why don't you stay with me? I'll work on my articles, of course, but that'll leave plenty of time for us. I liked this idea and agreed. At least let me pay part of the bill, I said. She waved me off. You can pay for our dates, okay? She asked. And it was decided. I checked out of my room and moved in with Ashley. That night, we went out for a steak dinner, danced a little, and then ended up back in bed. The next morning, we arrived at court on time to get good seats. The jury was brought from the hotel and immediately began deliberations. Ashley fulfilled her duties as a reporter by taking depositions from attorneys representing both sides and speaking with other observers and legal experts. The jury didn't need much time for making a decision. By 1:30, the message came that the jury was ready to return a verdict to the judge. Steve sat emotionless as the jury entered the courtroom. The judge took his seat and asked if the jury had reached a verdict. We are here, Your Honor, the foreman said, handing a piece of paper to the bailiff. The judge read the paper before folding it back. He turned to the foreman of the jury. Is this a unanimous decision? Asked the judge. The foreman confirmed that yes. Very good, he said. Defendant, stand up, the judge asked. Steve and his lawyer stood up. In the people's case against Steve Jenkins, the jury found defendant Jenkins guilty on all counts and unanimously agreed to the maximum penalty allowed by law, death, he said. Steve's lawyer asked the jury to determine the punishment if guilty, believing that this would make it easier to avoid the death penalty since the decision would have to be unanimous. If at least one juror disagrees, Steve's maximum penalty will be life in prison without the possibility of parole. It was a risk, and Steve lost. Thus, Steve was found guilty of 6 counts of first-degree murder, 1 count of manslaughter, several counts of conspiracy to commit murder, and several other charges. The defense asked to question the jury, and the judge agreed. One by one, each of the 12 jurors said they agreed with the verdict and punishment. Mr. Jenkins, I am not a big fan of the death penalty, but I completely agree with the jury's decision. If there is any case that deserves the death penalty, this is it. I order that you be removed from this court and transferred to the state prison in Huntsville, where you will be given the death penalty according to the law at the first opportunity, and may God have mercy on your soul, said the judge, striking his gavel. My lawyer approached me and asked me to follow him. We caught up with the officers escorting Steve from the courtroom. He talked to them for a few minutes, and they nodded, glancing at me. Steve looked up at me, his eyes red, his body bent like an old man's. What are you looking at, bastard? He said. Right now, I'm looking at a useless piece of crap, I said. I always wanted to know what he looked like. Now I know. My lawyer gave Steve 2 documents and asked him to sign them. What the hell? What the hell is this? He asked. One document is a relinquishment of all parental rights to Brian and Jessica Jennings, and the other specifies the distribution of your assets after your execution. Essentially, it is a will that says that the remainder of your estate, after paying taxes and penalties, will be liquidated and divided among three parts. One-third goes to Myrna Carter, the mother of your longtime mistress. One-third goes to a trust fund for Brian Jennings, and one-third goes to a trust fund for Jessica Jennings, he said. Steve looked angry, but realized he had finally lost and signed both documents. He looked at me with hatred in his eyes. "Are you happy now?" he asked. "I will," I replied. "By the way, Ashley Marks and I are getting married, and she has agreed to adopt children. Enjoy your hell, you bastard." My lawyer thanked the officers, and we left. I didn't see Steve again until the day of his execution. Finally, the nightmare was over, and I was looking forward to the next chapter of my life with Ashley. Ashley, as promised, let me read the article she wrote about me, and I was impressed. The story went viral, and Ashley appeared on several talk shows to discuss the whole horrific story. She was even offered the opportunity to direct a film, but she ultimately turned it down. However, she won a Pulitzer Prize for it. The Statesman let her go with regret, but realized that her life had changed and gave her a good bonus and recommendation when she left. The Daily Record's board of directors gladly hired her as its new managing editor, and the small paper's circulation tripled in its first year, prompting the company to build a new building and hire additional staff. We both decided we didn't want a big church wedding and got married in our backyard with family and friends invited. Ashley's parents came from Austin, along with several of her close friends from the Statesman. Her father walked her down the aisle and shook my hand warmly, handing it to me. Brian was my best man and Jessica was Ashley's maid of honor, making the wedding a true family affair. After exchanging vows, the priest asked us all to turn to the guests. "Ladies and gentlemen, it is my honor to introduce you for the first time to Mr. and Mrs. William Jennings and their family," he said to loud applause. Brian walked up to Ashley and hugged her. "Welcome to the family, Mom," he said, smiling. Ashley hugged him, tears in her eyes. Jessica also hugged her. "I love you, Mom," she said. "I love you too," Ashley said, hugging both children. My father walked over and hugged us both before taking an envelope out of his pocket. "I hope you two enjoy your honeymoon," he said, pulling out 2 tickets for a week-long cruise to the Caribbean. "Thank you, Dad," Ashley and I said almost in unison. And a new adventure began. 10 months after returning from the cruise, Ashley gave birth to twins, a boy and a girl. We named the boy William Frederick after my grandfather and the girl Alicia Marie after my grandmother Ashley. On their birthday, I happened to meet George Mason, a major politician in our area. He shook my hand, accepting my celebratory cigar. "Congratulations, Bill," he said. I thanked him. "By the way," he said, "you know there's an election coming up. There are a few people who think you could easily win Steve's place if you wanted to. After all, you're the one who finally beat him. Like our own version of the man who shot Liberty Valance, right?" I asked. He laughed. "Only this time John Wayne wasn't waiting in the shadows," he said. "Thanks, but I don't think I can handle the pay cut. I've got 2 new mouths to feed now," I said. "You could still run your business," he asked. "Is there any other reason?" "Well, yes, there is. Something my dad said the last time we were talking about this whole mess with Steve," I said. "And what is it?" asked George. "Power corrupts," I said. Subscribe to our channel so that your second chaff doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story, because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, don't even think about listening to the next one.